Hello, everyone. Hi. I'm Laura Scapitici, the Director of Programs for the Anthroposophical Society in America, and I'm joined here with Hazel Archer-Ginsberg, and there are lots of people coming onto the call. We have about over 350 people registered for this call, so we'll see how many we get on live today, and everybody else is going to get the recording. So Hazel, can you say hi so everyone can see you?
Greetings, friends. So good to be here with you.
Yeah, so we want to know where you are calling from. I'll have to tell you, I'm at a friend's house right now because we've had power outages in California to prevent fires. So hopefully I don't have any little kids busting in on me, but I have this beautiful blue background and yeah, Northern California. Where are you, Hazel?
I am in Chicago, not far from the great inland sea.
Beautiful. Okay, and so if you can type into the Q&A or the chat where you are calling in from, that'd be super. Oh, hey, we've got Atlanta on the phone with us or on the call with us, North Carolina, Sarasota, Florida. You guys can just type that right into the chat function. Manchester by the Sea, Connecticut. Oh, there's so many people on the call, Hazel. This is so exciting. Rochester, Minnesota, Brazil. Hey, Brazil. Missouri, North Dakota, Oregon, North Carolina, another Minnesota, Salt Lake City. Hello. Texas. This is amazing. Vancouver, New York. Hey, New York. How you doing? Meadow Vista, California. That's super. Portland. Oh, there's so many people, Hazel. Isn't this Maui, Arkansas? Wow, this is just incredible. Yep, and as I see people coming in from different places I haven't mentioned, that's Washington State, so many more. Thank you all for being here. I have to say it's an absolute pleasure to be working with you, Hazel. I've been following your blog, reverseritual.com, and you can see that right up there. And I know you've been going across the country, that you've been working festivals for a long time and creating them with people and offering workshops on anthroposophy, and that you're on the Central Regional Council. So the Anthroposophical Society has different councils across the country, groups of people that provide leadership, and you're part of that leadership group for your branch, your local area, and also for the whole Central region. Your images that you provide in your blog are fantastic, and we're going to see more of that tonight with you. So I'm just so happy to be here with you, Hazel. And at the end of this, if folks want you to come visit them, like you're going to the south of the country in just a few weeks, I know that they will know how to reach you now. So thanks for being with us, Hazel. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, this is such a powerful theme. I think everybody can relate, right? We all are mortal, and this is something that comes to all of us. So it's really just a thrill to be here on this eve of All Hallows Eve. So we're really at this, deep immersion in the Michaelmas season. And so for those of us who follow the calendar of the soul, I have mine right back here. Thank you, Angela Foster. We really are able to take in the cosmic iron of the season, strengthen our blood and give us the will forces to go into the dark of the year with awakened consciousness as we work to kindle that inner light when all around us the outer light grows dim. So did anyone experience that recent stream, the remnants from Halley's Comet, radiating from Orion? You might want to share that a little bit. Even here in the city, I was able to go down by the lake and see a few shooting stars. So very, very much part of this season. And I put this quote up there because it really is perfect for our reflections tonight. A Michael festival calls for us to feel in our souls everything that can activate spirit consciousness. So these lectures provide a potent connection to the interweaving between worlds that is especially strong now. For we are entering the time of the cross quarter. So this is the halfway point between the autumn equinox and the winter solstice. And it's called by many names in many cultures: the final harvest, the feast of the dead, Halloween, you might have heard of that one. Samhain, which is the Celtic name, which means end of summer or end of the dark half of the year. And so it's really a sacred time out of time, when the veils between the worlds are thin and the spiritual realm beckons. Can you feel the shift? So those of us who tune into the cycle of the seasons, to the festival life, we can really feel these subtle changes and get into the flow of this cosmic and earthly dance that's happening right now. And so, my friends, the spirit of the season asks us, do you have the courage to look beyond the mask of the material world into your deepest self, into the realm of soul and spirit, into the place of beginnings, the time of unbornness, the place of endings, when we shuffle off our mortal coil, only to begin again and yet again as we strive toward the eternal, remembering that every ending is a new beginning. So this season is a time when great transformations are possible, since the power of all the worlds, the past, the present, the future, are especially available to us. So in anthroposophical terms, we can relate it to the foundation stone meditation and the directive to practice spirit recalling, right? To look back at our divine origins. And then that gives us a perspective when we think about spirit sensing of the present moment. And then we can look to spirit beholding to see where we're going for the future. And I put this image here, which I love, of the maiden, mother, and crone. So this idea, again, of past, present, and future. And all of them are always present in every moment. We have to remember that part too. So many of us have attended the gates of birth and death with awe and wonder, right? And so through my work as a festivals coordinator, and I'm also a trans-denominational minister, I've learned that those who've crossed the threshold, as well as those waiting, to come across the rainbow bridge into a new incarnation, want to work with us. So acknowledging their presence is a reminder that everything physical is an outer expression of spirit. So in the realities that the great Rosicrucian initiate Rudolf Steiner brings in his many, many teachings on communicating with our dearly departed and working with the spiritual hierarchies, we learn not only what the dead can teach us about the life between death and rebirth, but also what it means to be human in a spiritual sense. We learn of the importance of working with, he calls them the so-called dead, which I love because it really shows that, yes, we are still human beings, even if we don't have a physical body. So it's important to work with those so-called dead and the angelic worlds for both our own and for their development, as well as for the future evolution of the earth. It's no small task, right? But it's a true calling, a true human responsibility. So to communicate with the dead, we need to speak the language of the dead. And Steiner tells us that this is a language of verbs, everything related to activity and movement, not nouns. Yeah. So because they're living in the feeling world, what we call the astral world, which is one of openness. It's about connection. It's a heart world. It's an image world of weaving, interconnected feeling. So like the world of dreams, the world in which we encounter the dead is not a world of things, but primarily a world of images. So there, we're not outside, but inside what we perceive. So the souls of the dead need nourishment, just like we need food on earth. So thoughts filled with heart and love become food for those who have died. And at the same time, through this process and through the process of living thinking and living feeling, the dead can also communicate with us. So Steiner recommends that at night, right before we fall asleep, when we enter that elusive hypnagogic state, that in-between space outside time and place, there we can connect with the so-called dead, and they can partake in our life of thinking and feeling. So it really helps to hold this soul quality of gratitude. And then we can pose a question. And in the morning, if we remain quiet, still and open, insights and feelings arise from our soul depths, and also from this cosmic web of thoughts that we share with the spiritual world. But Steiner says we must adapt ourselves to hear from them what we ourselves think as we receive their answers through our own soul forces. So in other words, yeah, we may think it's all our own idea. Yeah, we just woke up, we had this idea, it came from us. Well, maybe, perhaps, it was inspired into us, whispered to us by a loved one from the other side. Have you ever had that experience? Maybe you want to share that in the chat. Laura can read that for us later.
Yeah, that's great. You can share that in the chat if you like. And I just want to make sure everybody can see you, Hazel. That's not your fault if they can't, but folks, if you want to go up, it has different views that you can put on the screen. So you don't want to be looking at me, you want to be able to see Hazel. So you should be able to change your view. And I think most of you are actually seeing Hazel. Okay, and the one person I was most worried about sees you now, so that's perfect.
Good.
Okay,
Good.
I'm going to mute myself. So that question is for later, or do you want people to type that in now?
We'll get there in just a couple minutes.
Okay. Can you repeat the question? Can you repeat it?
Sure. I was just talking about how sometimes when we go to sleep at night, we pose a little question, and then when we wake up in the morning, maybe we have a thought or an inspiration, or I'm going to do this today, or boy, that's an idea that I'm going to use. I mean, that happens to me a lot when I'm working with the festivals. Like I'll ponder, well, how do I want to approach it this year? And I'll take that into my sleep, and then I'll wake up, or sometimes I'm walking the dog and all of a sudden this idea pops in my head. And, you know, we can think it's, well, that I'm so cool, boy, I thought that up myself, when maybe it was inspired into us. And so I'm asking, you know, has that ever happened to you? Where you get this, you know, you take something into your sleep and then you really do receive an inspiration. So I've put this slide up here because Steiner talked in his autobiography, From the Course of My Life, and he talks about how two people who had passed the gate of death helped him create this main philosophical work, a little book called Intuitive Thinking as a Spiritual Path. We know it as Philosophy of Freedom. And also specifically The Portal of Initiation, which was his first mystery drama. He talks about how somebody from the other side inspired into him, and he was able to write these great things. So he speaks about this kind of, he calls it an incorporation, as well as discarnate individualities working from the spiritual world to bring anthroposophy into the world. And he specifically mentions Goethe. And of course, he had a great connection with Goethe when he worked in Weimar with the Goethe archives and such, and talks about him sort of standing there at his shoulder, giving him inspirations. And we can also begin to notice how chance encounters and synchronicities may bring us insights as well. So long as the Dalai Lama mentions, we can let go of all of these preconceived ideas and expectations, right? We think it's going to look a certain way, or it's got to come like it does in the movies. Well, you know, we have to be open that maybe it's going to look a little bit differently. So yeah, I'm sure, again, there's many people that have had stories of these kinds of coincidences that profoundly affect our lives. Maybe you want to share some of that. And of course, many people know about this idea of meditative reading of spiritual literature. It's a great way to reach out to those who have passed. And it's a great comfort to them. It's a great comfort to us. Have you ever done this? You know, perhaps there's a favorite book that your loved one really just couldn't get enough of. And maybe one day you just open it up at any place, and that thing that you read, maybe that's a message to you from them. Or maybe it's something that they need to hear. You know, remember, it has to be this active verb, this doing. So yeah, why don't we take a little minute here and see if anybody has any comments or questions or insights from some of this so far, because we're going to start to take a journey now. We're really going to get a little practical now. So did anybody have anything to share?
Yeah, that's great. So you can share in the chat or in the Q&A. If you share in the chat, and you could share with everybody that's on the call. So that could be part of what you do. I think the Q&A is a little more private. So you decide what you want to do. But I do have people responding, Hazel. So I've had someone say that they've heard the voice of someone who's passed when they were like in a waking or dream state. And then someone else saying that answers come to them when they meditate. Last year at the Sacred Gateway Conference, which I think you're going to be involved with this year. It's our conference on death and dying. We talked about two high school girls that passed away together. And there was a remarkable sort of pageant ritual celebration that happened, and they could really kind of hear them at this conference. So that's really amazing. Oh my goodness, this one is really moving. Someone said they converse with the donor of the transplanted lungs that they have in their body. So this is amazing. There are also questions coming through, which if you type them in, maybe copy and hold them for me, because we'll come back to some questions later. I think we'll have more time for questions at the end. So hold on to those questions and make sure you have them and are ready to type them in again later.
Great.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Let me see if I've got anybody else in the Q&A that I might have missed. And yeah, just more questions. So we'll hang on to this for later, right, Hazel?
Great, sure.
Yeah, thanks.
Good. So I would like to describe a practice, which I often do for various communities at this time of year. And I think it's important to share. It's a practical guide for the life between death and rebirth. The universal journey across the threshold that we have all taken many times before, and we will take again and yet again. So this kind of journey it's been part of our community's traditions, and especially we do this thing called the Circle of Remembrance. We've done that for many years. So while I'm describing this ritual, perhaps you can think about your group or branch. What do you do for remembering the dead? Do you have an All Souls Festival? We could share that also for later. And maybe you want to think about and share what your family customs are, or some sort of cultural expression that you have adopted. Or maybe this is the year where you're going to start a new tradition. So, and I also want to invite you to dedicate this imagination to someone who's crossed the threshold, someone perhaps that you want to connect with, or perhaps you will use this as a chance to do your own inner work around these themes. Okay, got all that? So if we were all together, we would possibly set up some stations, 7 altars in a sacred space to enact this experientially, right? But obviously for this format, we're going to employ what spiritual science calls imaginative cognition. We're going to use our imaginations, and use it as a guide to understand what our soul experiences when we pass to the other side, dying on the physical plane, only to be reborn in the spiritual world. So you ready? We begin this journey by crossing the threshold. And can you imagine a sounding in the key of D? Let's see, I have my little pitch pipe here. So this is the tone that the earth in its present incarnation also vibrates to. It used to be in the key of C, which corresponds to Mars, but we are now in what is termed the Mercury phase. So as we'll see when we go through each one of these spheres, there's a tone, a eurythmy gesture, a color, a seal, etc. All of these are spiritual beings. The earth is a spiritual being. It gives off a tone. So we're imagining this tone of D. And so I ask you to inwardly vibrate the key of D and imagine shuffling off that mortal coil, leaving first the physical body, and then over 3 days, the formative forces of our etheric body dissolves. I just love this image up there of, sort of taking off the skin, and there we are, these amazing cosmic beings. So that's basically what we're going to be doing right now. And so we imagine the space between the earth and the moon. So this is the realm in which the human being, released from the physical body, dwells during what in Hindu terminology is called Kamaloka. Your tradition might call it purgatory. So can you now imagine your spirit expanding more and more up to the moon sphere? And as we're expanding, we see a panorama of our life in a backward review. So that's why we do that Rorschach. We do that backward review as a meditation before we go to sleep at night, while we're still in a body. And that prepares us for this time, this ultimate initiation when we cross the threshold. We do this backward review. And Steiner talks about this idea of time becoming space. We hear that in the Parsifal myth as well. Of course, we could take many lifetimes to try to meditate on what that means, right? So yeah, that's what we're doing in Kamaloka, which is the region of burning desires, right? So what does that mean? Well, we're getting used to the fact that we don't have a body anymore, where we're able to satisfy our desires, where we were able to quench our thirst and do all those things. So now we're getting used to not being able to meet our earthly longings in the same way. And so it's this idea of entering this fire of purification, to let go of all of that, those trappings. And at this time too, we start to be able to experience what we have done to others from their point of view. Yeah. So this is how we start to feel our karma and make amends and think about how we can be better people in our next lives. So yeah, we're imagining ourselves continually expanding into as large as the orbit of the moon. And Steiner says that this phase lasts about a third of our lives, which is also the measure of time that we spend sleeping. So now, during this phase, all that we experienced in the spiritual world while we slept will also be revealed to us, right? All that work that we're doing. Sometimes we wake up and think, boy, I was really working hard in my sleep last night. Or gosh, I wish I could have remembered that dream. Yeah, so that will start to be revealed to us. And so this period of 1/3 of our lives, so what that might be 30 years in an average lifespan. So most of the people that we know who have crossed the threshold are in this region. So as you can see, since they're really burning off these desires and entering these fires of purification, they really need our attention. They need us to send them support and think about them. And Steiner gives some amazingly beautiful poems, mantras to work with, to bring coolness and to ease the heat bring comfort. So something to think about in this realm.
Hazel, you just answered one of the questions.
Oh, good.
So thank
Okay.
you so much.
Good,
Yeah.
good.
It's about, can you read to someone when they're in that period of time?
Of course,
So
especially, yeah.
yeah. So if there are other questions coming, let us know. I told Hazel I invited 2 people at the coffee shop I was at today. So they might be like, what is this? And there might be some other people on the call that aren't familiar with this, but just take it in as an image, an idea, a possibility. And we'll have time for questions later. An imagination, exactly.
So yeah, we're imagining now that we've reached this first of the 7 spheres, where, according to Steiner, we will be greeted by the primeval teachers. Steiner calls them the registrars of our destiny. So these wise beings never came into physical incarnation. They followed the moon when it separated from the earth, making a fortress there from which they inspired the initiates who worked with them, incorporating into them their wisdom. So when we meet them in this first station in the afterlife, they help us to unravel our karma. And so you can see here, we have this eurythmy gesture of the moon, right? And there's this sounding of the tone, etc., the color of this particular seal and such. So these gestures are part of what we would do while we were experiencing these spheres. And I would have musical instruments in each one that would give off these particular tones so that we could inscribe ourselves here. But we have to remember that we don't stay here for long. We do the work we need to come here for. And when we learn to, in this particular case, release our passions and longings, then we can expand on. And remember that we can't purify everything. So sometimes we have to leave something behind. And this is true in each one of the spheres so that we can expand on. And we will retrieve our baggage on our way back into incarnation. And this will become the focus for our next life on Earth. And I just wanted to mention, I was so inspired by Patrick Kennedy at the AGM. He reminded us of chapter 5 in How to Know Higher Worlds about the 7 requisites. And he talked about how it's important to not just have study groups, but to have a practice buddy. And I'm really lucky because my husband and I are practice buddies. And one day he came to the breakfast table and he had a little magazine called Being Human. Might have heard of it. Thank you, John Beck. And this great article by Clifford Venho, where he talks about eurythmy. And he talks about how the eurythmy gestures in each of the planetary spheres that Steiner reveals that God eurythmatizes. Don't you love it? This idea that doing eurythmy creates the human being. So in the planets, we're experiencing the vowels. And when we get to the zodiac, we experience the consonants, which are the building blocks of creation. So I just wanted to bring that up, that's part of the work that we do when we're in these spheres, that we're practicing eurythmy with these spiritual beings. So beyond the moon, we continue to look back at the earth, unfolding what is already developed in our relationships, right? Doing that work of our karma. And it's during this experience that we bring about the impulse to act differently in our next incarnation. This is how we create the will for karmic compensation. And then Steiner describes the human being like a cloud woven out of spirit. Don't you love that? And when we enter the Mercury sphere, Steiner says, a person who has developed qualities of compassion and clear thinking, qualities that are usually termed moral, lives gracefully into Mercury. We are lit up by spiritual beings. So, my friends, what would it be like to strive now in our life on earth to develop the gifts of Mercury? How can we cultivate compassion as a practice of moral thinking now? Yeah? This idea of being able to be clear in our thinking, to bring this morality as a gift in our lives at this moment. So again, whatever we cannot assimilate, we must leave behind so that we can move on. So do we understand what we're doing here? Where each sphere has a certain lesson, and it really does depend on the kind of person we were in life as to how much energy we can take in each sphere. So if we've done this work of having compassion and morality and clear thinking, then these Mercury beings can light up within us. We since we don't have bodies anymore, we're sort of interpenetrated. We're energy, and we can be lit up by these beings and take in those energies as food for our souls.
And just for some of the people that are just joining us, because I know some people are coming in late. So we did a little bit of the history of All Souls to begin with. And now this is sort of a look at when we think of people that have crossed the threshold at this special time of year, what they might be experiencing, and then how that relates to our life right now, right? Am I getting that right, Hazel?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And then also the fact that we have done this many times before. And so this could be a review for ourselves as well. I think that's important.
Right, because you said this time of year, we're looking at the past, the present, and the future. So these all come together within us at this time, and as we connect to those that have already crossed at this special time. Perfect. Right? Perfect. Yeah, okay, thanks.
Yeah. So then we expand on. We come to this next sphere, Venus. So here again, the human being is strongly influenced by the kind of person they were in life. So in Venus, we are contemplating our spiritual inclinations. Steiner says, people who have not been able to develop any religious feeling or spiritual experience are isolated. They cannot attract the forces needed from the loving sphere of Venus, which means that in their next incarnation, they will have an astral body that in a certain respect is imperfect. So here we see how karma takes shape, right? So again, can we decide in this lifetime to take up and think about things, the spirit behind nature, and to have a sort of loving interest in our fellow human beings? So the astral body is all about our feeling life, our soul forces, our thinking, feeling, and willing. And so that becomes affected by what we think about. And so if we are able to do that work while we are alive, when we come to this phase in our life between death and rebirth, then again, we can really receive the loving impulses that are available to us at this particular sphere. Tolerance, interest, love. Yeah, Venus. So this is followed by the human being expanding up to the sun. Now this is a turning point because we're moving from the lower planets to the higher planets. And in this phase between death and rebirth, Steiner talks about us being turned inside out. It's like this Leo gesture. And so to become fully penetrated by the energies here, it's essential to be open to receive all of these refined influences of the sun spirits. This is the second hierarchy. So the sort of the rhythmic system, the heart system. And so we can ask ourselves, have I contemplated the countenance of Michael, that cosmopolitan sun being who stands as our current time spirit? Are we able to see ourselves as a universal human being beyond nationality? The idea that the sun shines on everyone equally. That's an image that I try to cultivate. And above all, it's essential to try to know in this life the ruling sun spirit, the cosmic sun. So Steiner says that if you've been able to explore this mystery of death and resurrection, while living on Earth, you will be able to receive very high vibrations in this important phase of the afterlife. So we're moving on to Mars. And here Steiner describes us as really, we're getting to the higher planets now. We're not separate so much anymore. We're so deeply interpenetrated with the other spiritual beings in what is described as cosmic speech. So we become part of a cosmic conversation. We are one, word to word. So it starts to get a little poetic here, right? So something to sort of really take in our meditative thinking. It's hard to put these higher concepts into words. And so yeah, with our human minds, we try to think, what is the quality here? Of course, for me on Earth, I'm always thinking, oh yeah, Mars, it has those warlike aggressiveness. Yet in the spiritual world, Steiner says it's very different. So he describes that in the 17th century, the Buddha accomplished a kind of sacrifice for Mars. It is his mission now to exercise a pacifying influence there in order that his powers of peace and empathy might stream into the strength pervading in the Mars beings to gradually initiate a process of ascending evolution for this planet. So can we imagine cultivating the positive qualities of Mars, right? That sense of initiative and enthusiasm, the will to action, the power of the protective warrior, yeah, guarding peace and progress. So something to contemplate in Mars, where we just may meet the Buddha. So then the soul proceeds further and lives into Jupiter, the sphere of cosmic wisdom. So up until now, we still had a bit of connection to the earth. So remember, Steiner talks about there's always exceptions, but on average, we can say 1,000 years in the spiritual world, taking all of this energy in, doing all of this work. So by the time we hit this Jupiter sphere, we're pretty far out, right? The sun still has a bit of influence on us. And here we really see how the whole universe works in us through this harmony of the spheres. So Dr. Steiner gives a really great picture. He says, the transformation that we experience in the passage from Sun through Mars to Jupiter can be compared to orchestra music changing to choral music. So maybe you want to do a little homework and put on a little orchestra music, and then put on some choral music. See what it does to your soul. What do you feel when you make that transition? All of you musicians out there, maybe you have something to share around that kind of concept of the music of the spheres. So in this sphere of cosmic wisdom, we receive the insights from the divine Sophia, a preview of the Holy Spirit, which we will eventually rise to after the zodiac. A little preview here in the cosmic wisdom sphere. And then we come to Saturn, the sphere of cosmic memory or cosmic order. And so it is in this next sphere that we can start to transmute the forces acquired through the knowledge of spiritual science into forces that create our next physical constitution. Remember I mentioned that idea of eurythmy, the vowels and the consonants that make up the organs and the building blocks of the human being. So as we're at this very far sphere in the spiritual world, we're starting to make contact with that, so that in our coming life, we have a natural inclination toward the spiritual. And so I'm going to ask you at this point, what would it be like to experience ourselves as co-creators, as beings endowed with the word, the logos? So again, through eurythmy, we lift our body into the sphere of life. And then beyond Saturn, a kind of spiritual sleep sets in. So just like on earth, we need to rest, right? We need to sleep to heal tiredness and to gather new forces. So from a spiritual point of view, from now on, that heightened consciousness is dimmed, which makes it possible for us to undergo still more experience of deep transformation. So here we are interpenetrated by all the star colonies of spiritual beings in cosmic space, that we may learn to know them and ourselves as human beings in truth. So at this point in the journey, after we've inscribed ourselves in each one of those spheres, all those 7 stations that we've been to, we arrive in what is termed Upper Devachan. So then, again, if we were all together, we would really sort of look around the room and see that we are together as a karmic group. And we proceed to mirror the zodiac gestures. So we would do that together. And Steiner tells us, that if we really want to understand our karma, we must renew our wisdom of the stars. So usually after the zodiac, we would gather in that enhanced spiritual atmosphere and do a little biography work, talk about certain themes around death and dying. And then we hold, as I mentioned, that circle of remembrance to speak the names of those who've crossed the threshold that year. And then we often do, some sort of an artistic activity, because the color gesture, as you see, the color is also a vibration that can help us go beyond words and get right to the source. So this artistic activity helps us to celebrate and honor our beloved dead. So this is also a time to, for those who want to conceive, so they can envision their future children waiting at the rainbow bridge, right? Waiting to be called in. So when this feels complete, we usually open the space up for questions, and I'd like to do that now. Comments, sharing of our impressions of our journey so far. Does that make sense?
That's great. Thank you for walking us through that journey and for framing it in a way that if we were all together, all 105 of us that are on the call right now, what would we do together to honor the dead and to think of them? And looking at this tradition is across the globe in different ways, and that this is a special time of year. So thank you, Hazel. That's fantastic. And we have lots of time for questions. So
well, we do have more. The journey isn't over yet. We still have to go back, but
totally not over yet. Okay.
Yes.
So anybody have a question they want to ask right now? I have some people asking if they'd be willing to share from if all of us would be able to share from our own personal experiences. And I have seen some people do that. And I would invite that person to reach out to you, Hazel, personally, if they want to talk about that. I've been hearing more and more people say, I've been having these experiences. Who can I talk to about them? Is there somebody? And it's good to find those connections. There are some questions about the journey, and you already answered one. One is, can you get stuck in the cycle? Like, can you be like stuck in Mars, or can you be like, I would say in your own life while you're living, you can certainly get stuck in certain places, right? If we look at our own life. But what do you think, Hazel? Anything about that?
Yeah, Steiner really, he does speak specifically about how if we, if our karma has made it so that in our lives we haven't really dealt with those particular qualities that we will meet in these different planetary spheres, that we will not be able to receive all of the impulses there. So yeah, sometimes we won't be able to go beyond a certain stage, or sometimes we will feel isolated and will feel a little bit stuck. Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. And so that's actually a problem with what's happening in our materialistic world right now. People that are not able to have spiritual thoughts when they pass through the gate of death are not able to bring these spiritual impulses with them. And so they can't really go that far and receive these healing impulses. And so they're going to come back sooner and kind of have to keep knocking up against themselves until they decide to work through that. And so, Earth is our school, and we have to do a lot of work here before we can, graduate to the higher planes. So
super, thank you. And I think, connecting with those that have crossed, if they didn't have that, is particularly important too, right? Yeah. Okay. And then one other question about this in particular. Can you give us a more specific example? You said you do some biography and then you might do some art. Do you have a specific exercise or that you would suggest around the art, or is it something that would come through the group? Or
well, actually, Friday we're going to do an All Souls at the branch, and my dear friend Nancy Melvin, who is one of my wonderful artistic partners, she's going to lead an art exercise where we're going to take this idea of the past, present, and future, and we're going to look at ourselves in that way, and sort of use a color gesture to represent, okay, what was my past? What color was my past? And sort of go beyond the words and just use a color gesture and make shapes or do some sort of a working with that for each one of these phases. And then take this, we're going to do it like on a strip of paper. And then we're going to sort of make like this Mobius strip with it, where we attach it to all of our friends and create this spiral that we're going to put along the altar and bring that as questions to our beloved dead. So that's what we're going to do this year. And in past years, we've done other things.
That's amazing. Okay. That is so amazing. And I invite people to reach out to you to ask more questions about that, because now I'm like, okay, where are my crayons? I got to do this thing. That's really fantastic. Okay. We're getting a lot more questions, but I know you have some more to do.
Yeah, we can do more at the end too. We can do more.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. So we have about 13 minutes left. So
okay.
we're going to leave some time for questions.
Great.
Okay. Thanks.
So then we experience the cosmic midnight hour, right? This is denoted usually by the sounding of a crystal bowl or a bell, which signals us to begin our journey back to rebirth. So we go through all of this amazing transformation, and then it's like this feeling comes over us. Okay, I'm ready. I got to go back. I'm going back. I got stuff to do. You hear this call, and then you pass once again through the planetary spheres, but this time in reverse order, starting with Saturn, Jupiter, right? We go backwards through. And since we're going back to Earth, we're not inscribing ourselves into each station. We're symbolically picking up what we left in each sphere. And then I usually like to make little cutouts of these planetary seals so that people can pick that up as a token of that they were there, and they can go home and work with that seal on their own. So yes, dear friends, we must pick up all of the baggage we left behind, all that karma that we were not able to purify. We pick it up along with this planetary seal and carry it back into our next life until those lessons are learned. But these parts of ourselves still remain written in the stars. They are inscribed there in that Akashic record that we've heard so much about, which is always working out of the spiritual world onto Earth to help us shape our destiny. This is how our karma is prepared. So when we read our astrological chart, the position of the planets relative to the fixed stars gives us some indication of our karma. So here we see the real reason why the planetary patterns have an effect upon human nature. Interesting, right? So as I mentioned, Dr. Steiner describes the gods during eurythmy, which is what creates the human being. So when we practice this amazing new art form of movement, we are connecting back to these primal gestures that we did in the spiritual world. And we carry within us the whole universe. And really, what could give us greater strength for our duties on earth than the knowledge that we bear within us the forces pouring in from this great spiritual realm. So, my friends, today we really can prepare ourselves in life so that these forces can become active within us in a conscious way. So then the question really comes, hey, why wait? Why wait until we've died to do the reckoning? Why wait until we can no longer do anything about it? Why not begin the work of digesting these insights now? So we can begin to consider what the effects of our thoughts, our words, and our deeds are now. And we share so much with the people in our lives. I mean, look at Rudolf Steiner's autobiography. He really doesn't even talk much about himself. He talks about all the people in his life that made him who he was, right? So we can do that too in our biography work. We can look at all those people that formed us, and perhaps they're on the other side, and we can, think and remember those memories and send those loving thoughts to them as food. So, and we also have to realize that, sometimes there's situations with people which are perhaps not always so beautiful, right? That there are relationships that need to heal. And so we can, we can do that even if they have passed on. And we can really learn to live with this idea of death as a friend, as a confidant who tells us the truth, helps us to know when it's healthy to say no, when it's important to hold boundaries or to cut away what doesn't serve, right? So this kind of discernment is the inner work that allows us to know thyself. And this is the great work, which carves out a space within us where our true light can begin to shine. This work is necessary if we are to prepare a space for the birth of our higher selves. Yeah, this birth takes work. It's a labor, and it can be painful, but we must strive to be conscious enough to seek to know thyself. So yes, just as we carve pumpkins this time of year, can we carve out a space within ourselves, prepare a room of one's own, as our dear Virginia Woolf once said. So I ask you, what would it be like to carve out a space for meditation, for prayer, for quiet contemplation, a time to read to the dead? And this year, this time of year, gives us so many opportunities for that inward journey, if we choose to take it up. And it's really also a time to confront our personal and cultural attitudes toward death, right? There's a lot of stigma around it. It's time to celebrate the life force as it draws inward. All of those energies that were used for growth are given to the spirit now. So the season of All Souls is a powerful time to do this inner work. And what would it be like to do research into your own cultural roots and ancestral lines? Perhaps some of you have already taken this up, right? And, really, there's a lot of magical clues waiting to be revealed in the history of heritage, as well as investigating, cultures that have a strong attraction. Of course, without getting caught up in the old idea of heredity and, nationalism. So All Souls is a time to meditate on our link with the other side and connect with our beloved dead. It's also the realm that we slip into when we dream, or dance with ecstasy, or loosen the bonds of our logical minds to hopefully negotiate a smart new treaty with our dark side, right? To ask questions like, who have I been? Who am I now? And where am I going, right? Who do I want to become? So what would it be like to take up a true contemplation of these questions? Maybe you'll decide tonight, before you go to bed, you'll write them down, or perhaps you'll create an All Souls journal as a preparation for the Holy Nights. And don't forget, yes, sometimes we have to let something or someone die so that their energy can be released, used for something fresh and new. You know, when I lived in New York during my rock and roll days, I lived with the guitar player. We lived in his parents' basement. And upstairs, his brother was dying of AIDS. And this was before, you know, all the advancements in medicine. And he was just so frail and wasting away. But his mother had such a strong will force, and her will was holding him onto the earth. And it wasn't until she decided that she was ready to let him go that he was finally able to pass. So sometimes it's really up to us to say yes. Death is part of life, and we have to sometimes let something lay fallow, or to open up that space for a new beginning. You know, and remember that whenever we're in doubt, we can trust in the ever-present help of the spiritual world. So yeah, this is the harvest season after all, and so we can ask ourselves, what seeds will we keep to plant next year? You know, or what do we want to compost? What do we want to burn away? What can we honor from our past and present to create our future? Remembering that what is remembered lives, and that every ending is a new beginning.
Thank you, Hazel. That's beautiful. So I'm just sitting with that, and people are saying thank you for the images, and thank you for the way that you presented the information. And there are also some questions coming. So we will not get to all these questions today. And so what I'd like you to do, I'd like to invite you to email me, laura@anthroposophy.org, and I will send the questions on to Hazel to get back to you. So it's laura@anthroposophy.org, or you can go to reversespiritual.com. But if you want to just get them directly to me, and I'll get them directly to Hazel, that's great. So let's see if anybody has any questions. I did see one question that I think comes up for a lot of people. So can we try to connect with a loved one who has passed that had little or no spiritual interests, whose life goals were primarily, you know, built upon this materialistic plane here, and they didn't really have any favorite books or readings that the person can think of? What do you do in those cases?
So Steiner talks about trying to remember certain particular details about them, the way they walked, the way they, you know, when they were eating a certain thing they did, or the way if they twirled their hair, or some sort of characteristic in that way. And to, you know, or to just remember them when their face lit up with a smile, you know, try to think of them as their higher self, you know, because we all are divine beings. And so if we picture them in these particular ways, that's sort of like a key that opens that door to them. And then when we picture them as their highest and truest self, we create that image of them as they could be, and send that as a message to them. And that can be a bright light for them on the other side.
Wow, that's a beautiful answer. Thank you so much. That's great. Okay. I think a lot of us have that happen, and we're not quite sure what to do. So that's really great. Okay, I just wanted to read a comment from someone that when you were going through the planets, this person said that Saturn has a multi-generational influence in my paternal family line, focused on healing inherited, in quotes, health conditions. And she said this insight emerged when you were talking about the planet. So I'm reading that so people know that they can go back and watch this or listen to it and really tune into what the different planets are. And maybe something like this will emerge for you in your family line or in patterns in your life. So I think that was a really helpful comment to hear. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Okay, here's another question about the equinox. And we just have a minute left, so maybe I'll just ask one more and go from there. Does equal day and night play a part in being able to tap into the spiritual, super sensible world at a, like this optimal level. So is there something, can you just say a little bit, why don't we close with that? Because there's so much here, and people can email me their questions, and we'll have to go into our own All Souls journey, even starting tonight. So
That's right. That's
thanks.
right. Eve of the Eve.
Even
Yeah, I
the
mean, yeah, you know, and so you can go back to that slide and you can see it as the circle of the year. And so you can see it's divided into the four, the solstices and the equinoxes. But then there's those cross quarters that we mentioned. And so that we're standing at this cross quarter now too. So it can be divided into 8. And so these are sort of power points of the year, right? And when we come to these things, there are certain planetary alignments that are occurring. And it does bring a certain energy alive. And so again, if we are attuned to speaking with the stars and being in this cosmic flow, it does give us certain energies and powers, if you will, to work on deeper levels. So yeah, I mean, I think it's important to tune in to these things and see what emerges. Just have an experience of just saying, okay, today is a cross quarter, and I'm going to just be present to what does that mean? What's coming through for me on this day? You know, do your own spiritual scientific research, you know, just by being open and aware and conscious. And then share it with us.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. If people want to email us what their tradition is or what they're doing or what they've noticed, maybe we can share that out a little bit. So thank you so much. If anybody does a ritual or does something special, you can send me a photo too. And sometimes we post those things on our social media accounts so people can see a drawing that was done or an altar that was made. So people have something to model after and just appreciate. So thank you so much, Hazel. This has just been amazing, and everybody's saying thank you, and really just happy, including your daughter.
Oh, yay!
She sent a heart. Okay, thank you, everybody. And please send me those questions we didn't get to, and I will make sure they get passed on to Hazel. And consider coming to our Sacred Gateway Conference this April. That is about death and dying, conscious living, conscious dying. And we're hoping you're going to be with us there, Hazel, too. Okay,
Detroit.
thanks. Yes, in Detroit. That's right. April 16th through the 19th in Detroit, Michigan. Thank you so much, everybody. And we'll see you soon. And check reverseritual.com. And I know you're going to have lots of posts this week about this. So looking forward to it. Thank you. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you so
Bye.
much. Thank you. Peace.